I've worked the graveyard shift at the Oak Ridge radio station for the past 5 years. It's the only station in town, a small, dusty building on the outskirts of nowhere, where the signal barely reaches beyond the pine-covered hills that surround us. Most nights, it's quiet. Sometimes, too quiet. Oak Ridge, Colorado, is home to fewer than 300 people. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone. Where the gas station closes at 9, and the only bar serves beer out of plastic cups. A place where nothing ever happens. Until last night. At exactly 11:57 p.m., every emergency siren in town started wailing at once. My radio console crackled to life, the signal overriding everything else. The station lights flickered, and then, through the static, a voice came through. A voice I had never heard before.
Attention, Oak Ridge. This is an emergency alert. Please listen carefully.
I sat up straight, heart pounding. The voice was flat, robotic, pre-recorded. The signal was strong, too strong. It was coming from every frequency at once.
For your safety, you must follow the rules below until dawn.
A sick feeling twisted in my gut. This wasn't normal. This wasn't from any official station. And then the rules began.
Oak Ridge Emergency Directive. Rule 1. Do not look outside between midnight and sunrise. If you hear knocking at your door, ignore it. It is not someone you know. Rule 2. Do not answer your phone if it rings. It will sound like someone you love. It is not them. Rule 3. Stay inside. If you see someone outside after midnight, they are not from Oak Ridge. Lock your doors. Rule 4. If your television turns on by itself, leave the room immediately. Do not look at the screen. Rule 5. If you hear footsteps in your house, hide immediately. Rule 6. Do not fall asleep. If you wake up and something feels different, it is too late for you. Rule 7. By dawn, there will be 7 survivors. Make sure you are one of them.
The message repeated. Then the radio went silent. I stared at the console, my pulse pounding in my ears. Outside, the sirens died abruptly. And then, the power went out across the entire town. The station was suddenly plunged into darkness. For the first time in 5 years of quiet, uneventful nights, I realized I was not alone. The silence after the broadcast was unnatural. The kind that pressed against your skin, thick and heavy, like the whole town was holding its breath. I reached for the backup generator switch beneath my console. It was an old thing, prone to sticking, but it had never failed before. I pulled it hard. Nothing. No power. No radio. Just me, sitting in the dark, the glow from the on-air sign flickering like a dying candle. Then I saw it. Outside the front window, the streetlights were dead. The town beyond was nothing but a wall of black, the mountains swallowing any trace of moonlight. That's when I noticed the movement. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no. Something was shifting in the distance. Silhouettes moving between the buildings. Not walking, gliding. Rule 3. If you see someone outside after midnight, they are not from Oak Ridge. A tight, cold fear settled in my chest. I stepped back from the window. The radio console crackled. Not the emergency alert. Something else. A whisper. I leaned in, pulse hammering. The static was thick, like it was being forced through the frequency. Beneath it, I could barely make out a voice. Not the robotic one from earlier. A woman. She sounded familiar. Then my phone rang. I froze. The shrill ring cut through the quiet like a blade. Rule 2. Do not answer your phone if it rings. It will sound like someone you love. It is not them. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the receiver. Then, The voice on the radio changed. It spoke my name.
Ethan.
The voice. I knew it. I grabbed the receiver, breath catching in my throat. Mom? Static. Then softly.
Ethan, let me in.
My hands went numb. My mother had been dead for 3 years. The radio screeched. Every dial on the console spun wildly. The lights overhead flickered back to life for half a second, just long enough for me to see something standing outside the window. Tall, faceless, watching. Then, darkness again. The phone stopped ringing. The static cut off. For a long time, I stood there, gripping the edge of the desk, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then, a knock at the door. Rule 1. Do not look outside between midnight and sunrise. If you hear knocking at your door, ignore it. It is not someone you know. I stepped back. Another knock. Then, from the radio, my mother's voice again.
Ethan, please, just open the door.
I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knocks stopped, but I knew whatever was outside wasn't gone. It was just waiting. I didn't sleep. I didn't move from the console for what felt like hours, listening to the hum of dead air, feeling the weight of whatever was outside pressing against the walls of the station. My breath was shallow, heartbeat still pounding from what I had heard, or what had tried to sound like someone I had once loved. The knocking hadn't returned, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was expectant, stretching across the town like a held breath, waiting for someone, anyone, to slip up. At 1:34 a.m., the emergency alert returned. Not the full broadcast, just a sharp, static-laced warning.
Rule violated.
Then a pause, a low crackling in the background like distant movement. Then the voice again.
Subject, David Hollis.
The name hit me like ice water. David was the bartender at the Hollow Pine, Oak Ridge's only bar, a man who had been pouring drinks for as long as I'd been alive, a man I knew. The message continued.
Violation. Looked outside.
Something clenched in my gut. I scrambled for the transceiver, my fingers shaking as I switched to the local emergency frequency. David? Are you hearing this? Are you okay? Static, then screaming. It was faint, distant, cutting in and out through the static. I pressed my headphones tighter, straining to catch the words. Not right. Not a person. The eyes. Then, in a ragged, wet gasp, it saw me. A new sound crackled through the radio then, something unnatural. Not static, not interference. Something imitating the distortion of a voice, but warped and wrong. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the transmission cut to silence. The alert voice returned.
Subject, David Hollis. Status, removed.
The blood drained from my face. Removed. I turned to the window instinctively but stopped myself, squeezing my eyes shut. I wouldn't make the same mistake. I didn't need to look outside to know that David Hollis was already gone. Somewhere out there, he had broken the rule, and something had been waiting for him to do it. I gripped the edge of the desk, hands clammy, breath coming too fast. It was real. The rules weren't a warning, they were conditions, a set of boundaries in a game I didn't understand, played against something I couldn't see. And someone had already lost. By dawn, there would be only 7 left, and I wasn't sure if I'd be one of them. The transmission cut off, leaving me in a silence that felt heavier than the air itself. I sat there, gripping the desk so tightly, my knuckles ached, my heartbeat thrumming in my ears. David Hollis was gone. Not injured, not taken to the hospital, just removed, as if he had never existed at all. I swallowed hard, willing my breath to slow, but the cold grip of dread was already curling around my spine. The rules weren't just suggestions, they were conditions for survival. I forced myself, to check the time. 1:47 a.m. The night was still deep, and sunrise was nowhere near. The air in the station felt different now, thicker, pressing in from the edges of the room like something unseen was waiting for me to make a mistake. A gust of wind rattled the walls, but I knew better. There was no wind tonight. I forced my shaking hands to reach for the transceiver, switching to the emergency town frequency. "This is Ethan at the Oak Ridge radio station. If anyone is hearing this, respond immediately. Stay inside. Follow the rules." I released the button. Static. Then, after a long pause, a voice. At first, I thought it was someone I knew. The cadence was familiar, but the words didn't fit.
"You should leave."
My stomach twisted. Who is this? Silence. Then, a soft click, like someone tapping a fingernail against the microphone. Once. Twice. 3 times. Something deep inside me told me not to wait for the 4th. I cut the feed, exhaling sharply, running a hand over my face. I had been a radio operator for 5 years. I knew the voices in this town, the tones and inflections of every regular who called in. That voice, whoever it belonged to, was not someone from Oak Ridge. I needed to focus. I turned back to the monitoring system, a secondary display that tapped into the town's outdated emergency alert grid. Most of the screens were dead. Without power, the surveillance system was useless. But one still worked. The traffic cam on Oak Ridge's main street. I leaned forward, my breath hitching. The resolution was grainy, flickering, but it showed just enough. The street was empty at first. Then, at the far end of the road, a figure emerged from the dark. Not walking, not running, just standing, like it had always been there. A second figure appeared beside it. Then a third. Too tall, too still. I watched, my hands frozen over the keyboard. Their heads twitched. And then, all at once, they turned to face the camera. Not like people, not naturally. Their movements were sharp, disjointed, as if their bodies didn't quite understand how to function. And then, they started moving toward the screen. I jerked back instinctively, even though I knew they couldn't reach me. But something about their movement felt wrong. Not human, not entirely. My stomach twisted. The rules had said not to look outside, but nothing about looking through a camera. Had I just broken something? A loud noise thundered from the speakers, a sharp, high-pitched sound, like distorted radio feedback, except beneath it, there was something else, something speaking. I lunged for the console, slamming the mute button, but the sound didn't stop. It bypassed the speakers entirely, humming through the walls, the floor, the air itself. A voice, speaking inches from my ear.
3 are gone.
The monitors glitched. For a fraction of a second, the screen turned to static, and when it cleared, the street was empty again. The figures were gone. I scrambled for my notepad, my breath coming short. 3. It had said 3 were gone. David was the first. Who were the other 2? I reached for the transceiver again, my fingers numb as I switched channels. If anyone is still listening, respond. If you're alive, say something. Silence. Then, a voice I hadn't expected. Katie, the girl from the diner. The last person I had seen before this nightmare started. She sounded out of breath, whispering into the mic.
"Ethan, you're still here?"
Relief flooded me. "Katie, where are you?" A pause, then slowly.
I don't know. My house, but..."
Then she made a sound, a sharp inhale, a sound of realization.
"Ethan, I think I fell asleep."
My stomach dropped. Rule 6. Do not fall asleep. If you wake up and something feels different, It is too late for you. Katie, I said carefully, gripping the desk. When you woke up, did anything feel wrong? Silence. Then, in a voice softer than before,
I don't remember falling asleep. I felt like I was drowning.
Katie, listen to me. Where exactly are you? A pause. Then,
I don't think this is my house.
A slow creak sounded over the speaker. A door opening. A long pause. Then, she whispered,
Ethan, there's someone in here with me.
And the transmission cut off. I sat frozen, gripping the transceiver so tightly my fingers ached, my breath coming fast and shallow. Katie was gone. Not dead. Gone. The same way David had vanished. The same way 2 others had disappeared without a sound. 3 were already lost. 4 more to go. I pushed away from the desk, running a trembling hand over my face, my skin slick with sweat despite the chill that had settled in the radio station. I forced myself to think, to focus. But something inside me was starting to slip, as if my thoughts were fraying at the edges. I needed proof. I grabbed my notepad, flipping back to my list of Oak Ridge's residents. A habit from slow nights. Writing down names, numbers, little details about the voices that called into the station. It wasn't an official town registry, but it was something. 289 names. I ran my eyes down the list, trying to find David Hollis. His name wasn't there. My fingers tightened around the pen. That wasn't possible. I had written it myself. I knew his number. I had called him just last week about a lost wallet someone had turned in. I searched for Katie. She wasn't there either. I flipped through the pages, my breath hitching. More names were missing. Whole sections of the town were just gone. The ink hadn't faded. There weren't any scribbles or eraser marks. The pages were just as I had written them, but the names had never been there. I slammed the notebook shut, chest tightening. The radio crackled, not static. Movement, like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. I leaned toward the speaker, pulse hammering, every part of me screaming that I didn't want to hear whatever was coming next. A breath. Shallow. Ragged. Too close to the mic. Then, a voice. Not mine, but almost.
Ethan.
I jerked back so hard my chair nearly tipped over. My own name spoken in a voice that mimicked my own. It was wrong. Like an echo stretched too thin, distorted at the edges. Then, from outside the station, footsteps, slow, measured, coming closer. I held my breath, gripping the desk, heart hammering against my ribs. Something was outside. Rule 5. If you hear footsteps in your house, hide immediately. I shut off the radio, switched off the monitors, cut the power to the console. The room plunged into complete silence. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. I stared at the handle, my pulse so loud in my ears, it almost drowned out the sound of the slow, steady breathing on the other side. It wasn't human. No one breathes like that. I pressed myself against the farthest wall, keeping my eyes trained on the door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, slowly, the handle turned. It didn't shake or rattle. It wasn't the frantic movement of someone trying to force their way inside. It was calm, like whoever was outside already knew the door was locked and was only testing it for their own amusement. The handle stilled. Then, knocking. Then the voice came again. Ethan. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. It sounded so close. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing myself further into the wall, as if I could fade into the room itself. A long silence followed. Then, as if it had never been there at all, the presence was gone. I stayed in place, frozen, until my legs started cramping beneath me. I wasn't stupid enough to assume it had left. just like before. It was waiting. I forced myself up, moving stiffly back toward the console, flipping the power back on. I needed to know who was left. When the radio hummed back to life, the emergency alert had already begun.
Rule violated.
My stomach sank.
Subject, James Marston.
James, the mechanic, a good man with 3 kids.
Violation. Answer the phone.
A sharp spike of static hissed through the speakers, almost like laughter.
Subject, James Marston. Status, removed.
I let out a shaky breath, my hands gripping the desk as my legs nearly gave out. 4 gone. The town was unraveling around me. The list of names in my notebook was shrinking. People weren't just dying. They were being erased, and we weren't even halfway through the night. 3 left to disappear. 7 would remain, and I had no idea how to make sure I would be one of them. The clock on the console read 2:57 a.m. Time was crawling, stretching like old film unraveling, but every time I blinked, it felt like I had lost minutes, maybe more. I checked the emergency alert log. 4 names already gone. 4 people who had broken the rules and had been removed. Not killed, not missing. Removed, as if they had never existed at all. And the scariest part? I couldn't even remember if I had spoken to them yesterday. Their faces were blurring, memories thinning into static. I knew they had been here. I had to know, but I wasn't sure anymore. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to steady my breath. I had to keep my head straight. If I started doubting my own memories, I was already dead. The town outside was impossibly still. I hadn't heard another car, another voice, not even the wind. Like Oak Ridge had become a hollow space, a ghost town that didn't even realize it was gone. I switched the frequency, trying every open channel. "This is Ethan at Oak Ridge Radio. If anyone can hear me, respond immediately." Nothing. I switched frequencies again, my fingers numb. "If anyone is still left, I need you to respond. Don't tell me where you are. Just tell me you're still here." A long silence, then a voice.
"I'm here."
I exhaled sharply, gripping the mic. "Who is this?" A pause, then,
"I don't know."
The voice was young, male, but something about it made my stomach twist. "Where are you?" I asked carefully. Another pause, then quieter.
"I think I'm in your station."
The air in the room collapsed in on itself. I stared at the mic, my throat tightening. The breath in my chest felt wrong, heavy, like I had just inhaled something I wasn't supposed to. I turned slowly. The station was empty. The door was still locked. The windows were shut. I was alone. Wasn't I? I turned back to the console. "Stay where you are. I'm going to..." The radio screamed. A burst of static exploded through the speakers, so loud it sent a sharp, stabbing pain through my skull. I tore the headset off, my ears ringing. The entire station hummed, the air vibrating like it had suddenly been pulled too thin. Then, the emergency alert crackled to life.
"Rule violated."
No, not again.
Subject, Lisa Calloway.
Lisa, the high school librarian, always had a book in her hands, always smiling when she passed the station.
Violation. Watched the screen.
My breath hitched. The screen. The television. Rule 4. If your television turns on by itself, leave the room immediately. Do not look at the screen. I stood up fast, my body cold, my stomach hollow. The radio crackled again.
Subject, Lisa Calloway. Status, removed.
Another name erased. Another person I might not remember by sunrise. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to focus. Lisa had been Rule 5. That meant only 2 more were left to disappear. Then, and only then, would the town stabilize. 7 survivors. But what if I wasn't supposed to be one of them? What if the list was already decided? The thought nearly sent me to my knees. The radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't an alert. It was breathing, right next to me. I turned so fast my vision blurred, but nothing. The station was still empty. The chair behind me was untouched. The floorboards weren't creaking. But I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Something was in the room with me. I grabbed my keys, my bag, anything I could carry, and bolted for the door, wrenching it open into the suffocating dark. The town was even quieter than before. And when I looked back at the radio station, the on-air sign was flickering like something inside was breathing. I couldn't stay here. I had to find the others, if there were even others left. The air outside was thick, suffocating, as if the entire town was holding its breath. The silence wasn't natural. It was a forced stillness, a vacuum of sound that pressed against my ears, making my own breathing seem too loud. I gripped my flashlight tightly, scanning the empty streets. The streetlights were dead, their bulbs shattered or swallowed by the darkness. The neon sign of Wayland's Diner, the one that always buzzed faintly even when it was turned off, was gone. Not just broken, gone. As if the building had never had a sign at all. The town wasn't just losing people, it was losing pieces of itself. I had one goal: find anyone still alive. I moved fast, my boots crunching against the cracked asphalt as I crossed the street. The air felt thicker with each step. The houses lining Main Street looking wrong, their windows too dark, too hollow. I reached the first door and knocked hard. No answer. I tried the next house, still nothing. I kept moving, my pulse hammering. There had to be someone left. Then, from up ahead, a noise, a shuffling sound, uneven footsteps. I froze, heart hammering, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. Then I saw her. A figure emerged from the shadows, staggering toward me from the far end of the street. For a split second, relief crashed through me. "Katie?" I called out, taking a step forward. Then she stopped. Too fast, too unnatural. The way her body halted wasn't the way a person stops walking. It was like a puppet's string had been cut. The light from my flashlight flickered. I took a slow step back. She moved again. Not toward me, but closer in the wrong way. 1 second she was 5 feet away, then 2 feet away. Then, right in front of me. I stumbled backward with a gasp, nearly dropping the flashlight. My stomach twisted violently. The space between us hadn't closed naturally. She had just changed positions, instantly. I stared at her, my breath coming in short gasps. Katie? Her face was wrong. The features were there, but they didn't belong to her anymore. Her eyes were dull, her lips slightly parted, and when she tilted her head, it was like she was waiting for something. Like she was waiting for me to make a mistake. Rule 7. By dawn, there will be 7 survivors. Make sure you are one of them. She took another step forward, her shadow stretching unnaturally across the pavement. I turned and ran. I didn't think, didn't look back. I sprinted down the street, my breath coming in sharp gasps, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly over the empty road. Behind me, I didn't hear footsteps. I heard nothing, and that was worse. The town blurred around me as I ran, houses warping at the edges of my vision, doors disappearing from buildings that should have had them. The roads were stretching, shifting beneath my feet. I reached the gas station and slammed into the glass doors, yanking the handle. Locked. Inside, through the dusty windows, I saw movement. A figure huddled behind the counter. I banged on the glass. "Let me in!" For a horrible second, I thought they wouldn't. Then, the click of a lock. The door swung open, and I all but stumbled inside, my chest heaving. The man inside was shaking. His face was pale, eyes wide with exhaustion. It took me a moment to recognize him. Mark Finnegan. worked the night shift at the gas station. A guy I had made small talk with 100 times, always complaining about the cold. But tonight, his expression was different. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. "You're still here," he whispered. I nodded, trying to catch my breath. "How many of us are left?" His eyes darted toward the windows. I don't know. I think we're close to 7. Something inside me twisted. Close to 7. That meant there were still 1 or 2 more who had to go. Mark wiped a shaking hand over his face. "Did you see them? The ones that aren't real?" I thought of Katie. The way she had moved. The way she had stopped. I nodded. Mark exhaled sharply. "I think they're replacing people." "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, lowering his voice. "I saw my brother outside the gas station earlier." I frowned. "Your brother lives in Denver." "I know," Mark whispered. "But he knocked on the door. He called my name, and he sounded like him. Almost." The fluorescent light above us flickered. Outside, the darkness felt closer, pressing against the glass. "Mark," I said carefully, "did you let him in?" His breath hitched. His hands were shaking, his lips parted, just slightly. And I realized with a slow, suffocating horror, I didn't remember if Mark had been on my list. I didn't remember if Mark had been one of the ones who had disappeared. And if I didn't remember, had he been replaced? The gas station hummed with the low, artificial buzz of flickering fluorescence. The old coolers lining the back wall let out a slow, rhythmic drone, the compressor struggling to keep running. Outside, the darkness pressed against the windows like something alive, shifting subtly, watching. Mark stood near the counter, hands trembling slightly, staring at me with an exhaustion that ran deeper than sleeplessness. His breath was uneven, like someone forcing themselves to seem normal. I kept my own breathing steady, my fingers itching toward the flashlight in my pocket. He hadn't answered my question. "Mark," I said again, quieter this time. "Did you let your brother in?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. The seconds stretched. Then, finally, he shook his head. But something about the movement was off, reluctant, delayed, like he was forcing himself to say no. I felt my stomach twist. Something about Mark was wrong. The emergency alert had said there would be 7 survivors. That meant 2 more still had to be removed. And if I wasn't one of them, Mark might be. He looked down, rubbing his palms against his jeans. I haven't heard the alerts in a while," he muttered. Maybe we made it through." I didn't respond, because the emergency alerts hadn't stopped. I just wasn't sure if Mark could hear them anymore. The ding of the station's automatic doors made my breath catch in my throat. A figure stepped inside. I nearly backed up, hands tightening into fists. But when I saw who it was, I was terrified. Sheriff Dalton. He stood just inside the doorway, eyes scanning the dim store, his breath coming slow and steady. His uniform was neat, unruffled. Too clean for someone who had been surviving the night. The last time I had seen him was before the emergency alert began, before everything fell apart. Mark exhaled sharply. "Jesus, Sheriff, where the hell have you been?" The sheriff's eyes flicked to Mark. His lips curled into a faint, reassuring smile. "Keeping things under control." My stomach tightened. He looked real. His movements, his voice, everything seemed right. But so had Katie, and so had Mark. Sheriff Dalton stepped forward. His boots didn't make a sound against the tile, not even the faintest scuff. His eyes met mine. "You're the radio operator," he said smoothly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The sheriff's smile widened. "You've done well to make it this far." The air in the station changed. A dense, invisible weight settled over my shoulders, pushing down on me like something unseen had entered the room. The fluorescence above flickered, buzzing louder. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me, something uneasy in his posture, but he didn't move. The sheriff stepped closer. "Sunrise is soon," he murmured. "Not long now." His voice was so normal, so human, that for a split second, I almost believed him. Then his head tilted, just slightly, like he was waiting for me to make a mistake. I swallowed hard. The emergency alert's final rule echoed in my head. "By dawn, there will be 7 survivors. Make sure you are one of them." The unspoken warning was clear now. Not everyone who reaches dawn is real. I took a slow step back. "What happened to the others?" I asked, keeping my voice careful. The sheriff watched me. Then he smiled. "They didn't belong." Behind me, Mark made a small, sharp inhale. The lights flickered again, and the emergency alert crackled to life.
"Rule violated."
The sheriff's smile didn't falter.
"Subject, Mark Finnegan."
I turned to Mark. His face had gone white. "No," he whispered. "No, I didn't. I followed the rules.
Violation. Replaced."
I took a sharp step back. Mark turned to me, panic twisting his features. "Ethan." The radio interrupted him.
"Subject, Mark Finnegan. Status, removed."
Mark blinked. Then, as if he had never been there at all, he was gone. No sound, no struggle, just nothing. The weight in the air lifted slightly. The buzzing of the fluorescence settled. Sheriff Dalton stood where he was, smiling. "Looks like we have our final 7, he murmured. I felt cold, sick. 7 survivors. Me, and the sheriff, and 5 others who may not even be human. I took a step back, pulse thundering in my ears. "What are you?" The sheriff's smile widened just slightly. "Dawn is almost here," he said instead. "You should be grateful." The world outside was lightening, not the warm glow of sunrise, but something else. A pale, grayish light, rising from the horizon too fast, too unnatural. The rules had never said what would happen after sunrise, only that we had to survive until then. The sheriff watched me, and for the first time since this began, I realized something truly, terribly important. The rules were not meant to keep them out. They were meant to decide who got to stay, and now I was one of them. The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, but they weren't warm. They were pale, colorless, like light passing through murky water. The darkness that had smothered Oak Ridge for hours didn't fade away. It retracted, pulling back like something alive, curling into the spaces it came from. By the time the gas station clock hit 6 a.m., the emergency alert had stopped. The rules were gone, and the town felt different. I stood near the glass doors, my breath shallow, staring out at Oak Ridge. The streets were empty. Not a single car, not a single sound. No morning birds, no distant hum of engines from the highway. Just silence. I forced myself to step outside. The air was crisp, the sky a washed-out shade of blue, but the town still didn't feel real. I walked down Main Street. The buildings were still standing, but something about them was off. The colors seemed muted, the edges too sharp in places and too blurred in others, like a half-remembered dream trying to hold itself together. That's when I saw them, the survivors. 7 of us, just as the emergency alert had said. A woman stood in front of the diner, staring at the glass like she didn't recognize her own reflection. An older man leaned against a truck near the post office, his fingers curled too tightly around the handle of the door, as if he was afraid to let go. Sheriff Dalton stood across the street, watching me. His uniform was clean, his face composed. Too composed. I looked away. We weren't the same town anymore. I wasn't even sure we were the same people. I dug into my pocket, fingers curling around my notepad. I flipped through the pages, heart hammering, looking for the names I had written the night before. David Hollis, gone. Lisa Calloway, gone. Mark Finnegan, gone. Katie, gone. But I realized something else. I had stopped writing names after the fifth one disappeared. I didn't know if the other 3 missing people had ever existed at all. If I tried to think too hard about it, my memories turned to static. Ethan. I turned slowly. Sheriff Dalton stood behind me now, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He nodded toward the horizon, where the sun had fully risen. But its light still felt wrong. Too cold, too sterile. We made it. I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure if that was a good thing anymore. His gaze flickered toward my notebook. "Writing things down won't help," he said smoothly. "By tomorrow, you won't need it." I swallowed hard. Why? His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because soon, you won't remember anything else." The words hit me like a slow-moving weight, settling deep into my gut. I glanced toward the other survivors. They weren't talking. They weren't celebrating. They were just standing there, staring at nothing. Something had changed. The town had let us survive. But at what cost? I took a slow step back. "What happens now?" Dalton exhaled, a sound that almost sounded like laughter. "Now, we move on." I shook my head. "No, this isn't normal. Something happened last night, something real, and we need to..." He stepped closer. "Ethan." I stopped talking. His expression was calm. Too calm. He tilted his head slightly, and I realized I was the only one still asking questions. The others were just standing there, waiting, accepting. My pulse quickened. Whatever had happened last night, the people who had been removed weren't the only ones who changed. The 7 of us had survived, but that didn't mean we were human anymore. I took a slow step back, my throat dry. I need to leave," I muttered. Dalton just smiled. The air around us was too still. The town stretched endlessly in every direction, just as it always had. But I knew. I felt it. There was nowhere else to go. Oak Ridge had let us survive, but it had kept us too.